The fog of London, on that chilling morning of July 1st, 2025, was a shroud so thick it seemed to choke the very breath from the air. When a scream raw, desperate, and abruptly cut off pierced the stillness of Baker Street at 5:43 a.m., I, Dr. John Watson, dropped my pen, my heart pounding as I leaped from my chair, the half-written case notes scattering like leaves in a storm. Sherlock Holmes, his violin poised mid-stroke, froze, his hawk-like eyes narrowing toward the window where the sound had vanished into the mist. "Watson," he hissed, his voice a blade of ice that was no ordinary cry. It was the last gasp of a life extinguished. Before I could respond, a shadow flickered outside, and the faint scent of something acrid wafted through the cracked pane. What followed would drag us into an abyss of suspense, where a murder with no visible wound threatened to unravel the fabric of reason itself. We rushed to the window, but the street below was empty, the fog swallowing any trace of the victim. Holmes's gaze lingered, his mind already a whirlwind of deduction, when a thunderous knock shook our door. Mrs. Hudson's voice trembled as she called, "Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson." "There's a man here, Inspector Lestrade. He's pale as death." Holmes descended with the grace of a panther, while I followed, my medical instincts tingling with dread. Lestrade burst in, his coat sodden, his face etched with a terror I'd seldom seen. "Holmes," he rasped, "it's Lord Reginald Ashbourne, dead in his study at Ashbourne Manor. No wound, no struggle, door locked from within, and there's something else, a note, warning of more to come." Holmes's lips curled into a grim smile. "A murder without a mark, and a threat in the shadows. Watson, prepare yourself. This is no mere puzzle, it's a gauntlet." The hansom cab jolted through the fog-laden streets of Kensington, the clatter of hooves a staccato against the tension. Lestrade's words hung heavy. Ashbourne, a wealthy financier, had retired to his study the previous night, the door bolted by his valet, Thomas, at 10 o'clock. At dawn, Thomas, unable to rouse him, had forced entry with the butler, finding Ashbourne slumped over his desk, lifeless. "No poison we can detect," Lestrade said, his voice cracking. "The doctor swears it's natural, but the note, it spoke of a silent reaper striking again." Holmes's fingers tapped a cryptic rhythm on his knee, his eyes glinting with a dangerous curiosity. "A reaper that leaves no trace," he murmured, "intriguing and deadly." Ashbourne Manor emerged from the mist like a haunted relic, its windows dark, its silence oppressive. The household was a hive of whispered fear as we entered. Lady Eleanor Ashbourne, the widow, met us in the drawing-room, her dark hair disheveled, her eyes wide with a mix of grief and suspicion. "He was alive last night," she whispered, her voice breaking. "No one could they?" Holmes's gaze swept over her, noting the faint tremor in her hands, the smudge of ink on her cuff. "Who was here?" he asked, his tone sharp. She listed her son Edward, her sister-in-law Clara, and the staff, her words laced with an unease that suggested hidden truths. The study was a fortress of shadows, its oak panels gleaming, its shutters sealed tight. Ashbourne's body lay as described, serene, untouched, a quill still gripped in his hand, the ledger beneath him pristine. I examined him closely, my fingers probing for any sign of foul play. No cuts, no bruises, no discoloration of poison yet. His stillness was unnatural, as if life had been siphoned away. His heart may have stopped, I said, my voice uncertain, but without cause. Holmes silenced me with a gesture, already on his knees, magnifying glass in hand. Look at the desk, Watson. The ink is dry, no fresh scratches. And this. He lifted a blonde hair from the armrest, its presence a silent accusation. Not Ashbourne's, nor Eleanor's. Someone was here. He moved to the window, testing the shutters with a surgeon's precision, then turned to the fireplace, sifting through the cold ashes. He extracted a charred scrap of paper, a receipt for a chemical compound, its edges singed but legible. A clue, he whispered, pocketing it, as his eyes darkened with suspicion. The room seemed to close in, the air thick with the weight of unseen eyes. Suddenly, a creak echoed from the hallway, and Holmes's head snapped up, his hand signaling. Silence. Did you hear that? He murmured. I nodded, my pulse quickening. Whatever had killed Ashbourne might still linger, watching, waiting to strike again. We catalogued the room with meticulous care. Holmes noted the position of every object: the inkstand, the teacup half full, the ledger's open page, oft, residue from the cup's rim, sealing it in a vial, while I checked the fireplace again, finding nothing but ash. The creak came once more, closer now, and Holmes drew his revolver, motioning me to the door. We stepped into the hall, the silence deafening, when a shadow darted at the far end, a figure cloaked in black, gone before we could give chase. A witness or the killer, Holmes growled, his eyes blazing. This game has just begun. Back in the drawing room, Clara Ashbourne approached, her blonde hair catching the light, her demeanor nervous. Mr. Holmes, she stammered, is it true? Was Reginald murdered? Holmes's gaze locked onto her hair, then softened. That remains to be seen, Miss Ashbourne. Where were you last night? She hesitated, her fingers twisting. In my room, reading. I heard nothing. Her lie hung in the air, and Holmes's smile was a predator's. We shall see, he said, turning to Lestrade. I need the household's movements, their alibis, and Ashbourne's correspondence. This note of yours, let me see it. Lestrade produced a crumpled paper, its ink smudged but chilling. The silent reaper claims another unless the debt is paid. Watch the shadows. Holmes's expression hardened. A blackmailer, perhaps, or a madman. Watson, we take samples: tea, tobacco, anything he touched. This chemical may hold the key. As we worked, the creak sounded again, faint but persistent, and I glanced at Holmes, a shiver running down my spine. The manor was alive with secrets, and the killer, woundless or not, was still among us. Their next move, a heartbeat away. The investigation stretched into the afternoon, each clue a thread in a tapestry of dread. Holmes pocketed the hair, the receipt, and the vial, his mind racing. Lady Eleanor watched us, her composure fraying, while Clara's nervous glances betrayed her. Edward, arriving late from his club, offered a shaky alibi, his eyes avoiding ours. The note's threat loomed large, a specter of impending doom. As we prepared to leave, a final creak echoed, and Holmes froze, his hand on the door. Watson, he whispered, we are not alone. The Reaper watches, and we are its next target. The cab ride back to Baker Street was silent, the fog thicker, the suspense a noose tightening around our necks, promising a mystery that would test our very souls. The hansom cab rattled through the pre-dawn gloom of London, the clock striking 6:15 a.m. as we returned to 221B Baker Street. The fog a relentless shroud that seemed to whisper secrets of its own. My mind raced with the image of Lord Ashbourne's unmarred corpse, the creaks that haunted Ashbourne Manor, and the chilling note promising more deaths. Sherlock Holmes sat opposite me, his fingers steepled, his eyes glinting with a fervor that suggested he was already piecing together a puzzle I could scarcely comprehend. As the cab jolted to a stop, a low guttural moan drifted from the alley beside our lodgings, a sound so unearthly it froze my blood. Holmes's head snapped toward the noise, his hand gripping my arm. "Watson," he breathed. That was no human cry. Stay sharp. Death may have followed us home. The suspense coiled tighter, a serpent ready to strike. As we stepped into the unknown, we alighted, the fog swirling around us like a living entity, and Holmes drew his revolver, motioning me to follow. The alley was a narrow maw of shadows, the moan echoing faintly now, as if retreating. With cautious steps, we ventured forth, the damp cobblestones slick underfoot. A figure lay slumped against the wall, a man, his face obscured by a hood, his chest rising and falling with labored breaths. Holmes knelt, lifting the hood to reveal a gaunt face, eyes wide with terror, lips moving in a silent plea. "Help, the Reaper," he gasped before his head lolled, his pulse fading under my fingers. No wound, no blood, another victim claimed by the silent killer. Holmes's jaw tightened. To death's no marks. "This is no coincidence, Watson. We are in the grip of a mastermind." Back inside 221B, the fire crackled as we laid the stranger on the sofa, his identity a mystery. Holmes examined him with his magnifying glass, noting the faint residue of a sweet odor on his lips, the same acrid scent we'd detected earlier. "A chemical agent," he mused, scraping a sample into a vial. "But administered how? Inhaled, perhaps, or absorbed through the skin?" I checked for puncture marks, bruising, any sign of trauma, but found none. The man's death mirrored Ashbourne's peaceful, inexplicable. Mrs. Hudson entered, her face pale. "Another one, Mr. Holmes. What's happening?" Holmes's response was curt. "A storm is brewing, Mrs. Hudson. Bar the doors." As dawn broke, Inspector Lestrade arrived, his expression a mixture of exhaustion and alarm. "Holmes, another body was reported near the Thames story. No wounds. The public's in a panic. This note you mentioned, any progress?" Holmes produced the charred receipt, its text revealing a purchase of potassium cyanide from a chemist in Whitechapel. "A lead," he said, "but the method eludes me. Cyanide kills with agony, not serenity. We need the chemist and ledger." Lestrade nodded, dispatching officers, while Holmes turned to the stranger's pockets, extracting a crumpled letter addressed to the silent Reaper. The contents were cryptic. "The debt is unpaid. The next falls at midnight. Deliver or perish." The suspense deepened, a clock ticking toward doom. We set to work analyzing the samples. Holmes's chemistry set gleamed under the gaslight as he mixed reagents, his movements precise, his silence unnerving. I recorded his observations. The tea residue contained traces of an unknown compound, the lip residue a volatile substance. "A delivery system," he muttered, "something airborne or contact-based, leaving no trace." The clock struck 8 o'clock a.m., and a telegram arrived from Lestrade, the Whitechapel chemist. Mr. Elias Crane was missing, his shop ransacked. Holmes's eyes narrowed. A cover-up. Watson, we visit Crane's residence tonight. But first, the ledger. A hansom took us back to Ashbourne Manor, the day grey and oppressive. Lady Eleanor greeted us with a forced smile, her hands trembling as she handed over the ledger. Holmes pored over it, his brow furrowing. Large sums withdrawn, recently on for blackmail, perhaps. Edward Ashbourne entered, his face flushed. My father's business was private, he snapped. Leave it be. Holmes's gaze was unyielding. Privacy won't save you if the Reaper strikes again. Clara lingered nearby, her blonde hair a stark contrast to her pallor, her eyes darting. Holmes pocketed the ledger, noting her unease. In Crane's shop that night, the air was thick with the stench of chemicals. Shelves were overturned, vials shattered, but a hidden drawer yielded a notebook detailing experiments with a gas odorless, invisible, lethal. A breakthrough, Holmes whispered, but the formula's incomplete. A sudden crash from the back room sent us alert. We found a trapdoor, its hinges fresh, leading to a tunnel. The suspense was palpable as we descended, revolver in hand, the darkness swallowing us. At the tunnel's end, a figure in black awaited a mask, obscuring their face, a hiss of gas escaping as they fled. Holmes lunged, but the figure vanished, leaving a canister behind. Back at Baker Street, Holmes analyzed the canister, detecting a faint trace of the same compound. A nerve agent, he concluded, delivered via aerosol. The Reaper uses science. As a weapon, the clock neared midnight, the note's deadline looming. A knock at the door revealed a package. Ashbourne's missing funds, a ransom demand attached. Holmes's smile was grim. The game escalates. Watson, we bait the trap. As we planned, a creak sounded above, and Holmes's eyes met mine. A silent promise of danger. The Reaper was close, and the night held its breath for the next strike. The clock in 221B Baker Street struck 1 a.m. on this fateful Tuesday, July 1st, 2025. The silence of the night shattered by a sudden, ominous thud against the front door, as if fate itself had delivered a dire warning. I, Dr. John Watson, sprang from my chair, my heart hammering as I reached for my revolver, the flickering gaslight casting eerie shadows across the room. Sherlock Holmes, his silhouette sharp against the window, turned with a predator's grace, his eyes gleaming with a mixture of anticipation and dread. Watson, he intoned, his voice low and urgent, that was no accident. The Reaper has made its move and we may be too late to stop it. The suspense gripped us like a vice as we descended the stairs, the thud echoing in our minds, promising a revelation that could unravel the very fabric of our investigation. We flung open the door to find a small, ornate box lying on the threshold, its surface cold to the touch, a faint hiss emanating from within. Holmes snatched it up, his movements swift, and carried it to the table, where he donned gloves and a makeshift mask from his chemical kit. With a careful twist, he opened it, revealing a vial of shimmering liquid, a note tucked beside it. The veil descends at dawn. Pay the price, or the city bleeds. The liquid's iridescent glow sent a chill down my spine, and Holmes's expression darkened. A nerve agent, refined beyond Crane's notes, he muttered, and a death is mere hours away. Before we could analyze further, A scream pierced the fog from the direction of Paddington, a sound that curdled the blood and spurred us into action. A hansom cab raced us through the pre-dawn streets, the time now 1:30 a.m., the fog a relentless barrier to our haste. Lestrade met us outside a modest flat, his face ashen. "Another one, Holmes," he said, his voice trembling. "Mrs. Abigail Harrow, a widow. No wounds, just like the others. Found her maid sobbing. Said she heard a whisper before the lady collapsed." We entered the flat, the air thick with a sweet, cloying scent. And there lay Mrs. Harrow, her face serene, her hands folded as if in prayer. No marks, no struggle, lonely the same inexplicable peace that marked Ashbourne and the stranger. Holmes knelt, his magnifying glass scanning her lips, detecting the same residue. "The veil?" he whispered. "It's airborne, delivered with precision." The maid, a young woman named Elsie, recounted her tale through tears. "She was reading by the fire, sir, when I heard a voice, soft like a breeze. Then she gasped and fell. I saw a shadow at the window, but it was gone." Holmes's eyes narrowed, and he moved to the window, finding it latched from within, yet bearing a faint scratch on the frame. "A delivery mechanism," he said. "Perhaps a tube or nozzle. The killer is a phantom, striking from the ether." I examined Mrs. Harrow's teacup, finding it empty but coated with the same sweet residue, confirming Holmes's theory. The suspense mounted as the clock ticked toward to a.m. the dawn, deadline looming like a guillotine. Back at Baker Street, Holmes set up his laboratory, the gaslight casting long shadows as he worked. He heated the vial's contents, the liquid bubbling into a gas that stung my eyes, forcing me to step back. "A neurotoxin," he declared, "volatile and odorless in small doses, lethal in concentration. But how is it administered without detection?" He cross-referenced Crane's notebook, finding references to a dispersal device, its design incomplete. The telegram from Lestrade arrived at 2:30 a.m. A chemist's apprentice, Jacob Reed, had been found dead in Whitechapel. No wounds. A similar note pinned to his chest. "The Reaper cleans house," Holmes said, his voice grim. Reed knew too much. We returned to Whitechapel at 3 a.m., the streets deserted, the shop a tomb of shattered glass and spilled chemicals. Holmes searched Reed's body, finding a sketch of a handheld aerosol device, its nozzle designed for silent dispersal. "The poisoned veil," he murmured, pocketing the sketch. A sudden rustle from the back room sent us alert, and we found a hidden compartment, its door ajar. Inside, a figure in black crouched, a masked face turning toward us, a hiss of gas erupting as they fled through a rear exit. Holmes pursued, but the fog swallowed them, leaving a trail of the iridescent liquid. The suspense was a living thing. The killer's escape, a taunt. At 4 a.m., we analyzed the liquid, Holmes deducing its composition potassium cyanide fused with an organic carrier, rendering it odorless and rapid-acting. "A genius at work," he said, "but flawed. The carrier leaves traces." He crafted an antidote, a risky mixture of sodium thiosulfate and activated charcoal, praying it would counter the gas if inhaled. The clock struck 5 a.m., and a second package arrived. More funds. Another note. "Dawn nears. The city will pay unless you deliver by 6 a.m. Holmes's eyes blazed. A ransom, but for what? Knowledge, perhaps, or silence. We contacted Lestrade at 5:15 a.m., relaying the antidote's formula and urging citywide distribution. Seal the major streets, Holmes ordered. The Reaper will strike at dawn. As we prepared, a creak sounded above, and Holmes drew his revolver, motioning me to the stairs. The suspense peaked as we ascended, the house silent, the threat palpable. In Holmes's study, the stranger's body was gone, replaced by a third. Note, your next Holmes. The dawn deadline was minutes away, the city's fate tanned, hours hanging by a thread. The clock in 221B Baker Street ticked relentlessly toward 5:50 a.m. on this tense Tuesday, July 1st, 2025, the gaslight flickering as a low, sinister hum vibrated through the floorboards, a sound that seemed to emanate from the very walls. I, Dr. John Watson, stood frozen, my revolver trembling in my hand. The third note's threat, your next Holmes, burning in my mind. Sherlock Holmes, his face a mask of concentration, pressed his ear to the floor, his eyes darting to the ceiling where the hum grew louder. Watson, he whispered, his voice a thread of steel. That's no natural sound. It's the Reaper's device, primed to strike before dawn. The suspense coiled like a spring as we braced for the unknown, the city's fate and our lives teetering on the edge of a blade. With mere minutes until the deadline, we sprang into action, Holmes grabbing his chemical kit while I secured the windows, the hum intensifying into a rhythmic pulse. Holmes traced the sound to a vent near the fireplace, prying it open to reveal a thin tube, snaking into the wall, its end glistening with the iridescent liquid from the vial. A dispersal system, he hissed, severing it with a knife, the hum fading into silence. But the relief was short-lived. A sharp intake of air from the kitchen below signaled danger. We descended, finding Mrs. Hudson slumped against the counter, her face pale, her breathing shallow. No wounds, but the sweet residue coated her lips. The antidote, now, Holmes barked, and I administered the mixture, praying it would work. As the clock struck 5:55 a.m., Mrs. Hudson stirred, her eyes fluttering open, the antidote halting the toxin's advance. I heard a whisper. She gasped. A man in black. Holmes's jaw tightened. The Reaper was here, testing us. We searched the kitchen, finding a small puncture in the window frame, evidence of the aerosol's entry. The dawn deadline 6 a.m. was seconds away, and a telegram from Lestrade arrived at 5:58 a.m. City on alert. No incidents yet. Waiting your orders. Holmes wired back. Hold positions. Antidote distributed. Suspect inside. Threat neutralized. But as the clock chimed 6 a.m., a distant explosion rocked the East End, the ground trembling beneath us. A hansom cab carried us to the site at 6:15 a.m., the fog parting to reveal a chemist's warehouse ablaze, its walls crumbling. Lestrade met us, his face grim, a diversion. Inside the ruins, we found a shattered dispersal device, its design matching Reed's sketch, but enhanced with a timer. Sophisticated, Holmes said, collecting fragments. The explosion was controlled to destroy evidence. The time was 6:30 a.m., and a survivor, a night watchman, staggered forward, his voice hoarse. Saw a man, masked, fleeing east, dropped this, back at Ashbourne Manor, by 7 a.m. Lady Eleanor's reaction to the locket was a stifled sob. It was Reginald's, she whispered, a gift from Clara. Holmes's eyes narrowed. Clara Ashbourne, 16-law. Eleanor nodded, her composure fracturing. She's been distant since his death. I thought it grief. We sought Clara, finding her in the conservatory, her blonde hair disheveled, a vial in her hand. Explain, he demanded, the suspense thickening as her silence spoke volumes. Clara's confession spilled out at 7:30 a.m., her voice trembling. Reginald owed a debt to a society. They demanded payment, threatened us. I helped them, thinking it would protect Edward, but they killed him anyway. She hesitated, then whispered, the Order of the Silent Blade. Elias Crane was a member. They used his chemicals. The revelation sent a chill through me. The Reaper was an organization, not a lone killer. At 8 a.m., a telegram from Lestrade confirmed Crane's ties to a secretive group. Their headquarters rumored in Whitechapel. We returned to Whitechapel at 9 a.m., the streets buzzing with fear. Holmes led us to a derelict warehouse, its door locked, its windows barred. The suspense peaked as we forced entry, finding a laboratory within vials, devices, and a ledger detailing the Order's targets, including Ashbourne, Reed, and us. A hidden passage revealed a chamber, its walls etched with symbols, a masked figure awaiting us. You're too late, they hissed, releasing a cloud of gas. Holmes tackled them, and I dragged him clear, the antidote saving us again. The figure escaped, but we secured the ledger. The clock striking 10 o'clock a.m. at Baker Street by 11 a.m., Holmes decoded the ledger, identifying the Order's leader, Sir Percival Drayton, a reclusive noble, a mastermind with resources, he said. The Reaper's veil is his creation. The time was 11:30 a.m., and a knock brought a package. Ashbourne's funds returned a new note. Drayton awaits. Midnight, or London falls. The suspense was a living pulse, the city's fate tied to our next move. As we planned, a creak sounded above, and Holmes's eyes met mine, the threat ever present. The Reaper's game was far from over. The fog of London clung to 2-1B Baker Street like a shroud at 11:45 a.m. on this fateful Tuesday, July 1st, 2025, the silence broken by the sharp crack of a gunshot echoing from the alley below. Its report, a harbinger of doom that jolted me. Dr. John Watson, from my notes. Shot. It was a signal, a challenge from the Reaper's master. The suspense seized us as we rushed downstairs, the gunshots echo fading into the mist. The fog, swirling around a crumpled figure, a young man, his chest bleeding, his eyes wide with terror. No wound from the Reaper's silent method, but a bullet had found him. I knelt, applying pressure to the wound, but his pulse faded under my fingers. Tell us, I urged, but his last words were a rasp. Drayton betrayed. Holmes searched him, finding a pocket watch engraved with the Order's symbol, its hands frozen at midnight. Drayton's move is imminent. The time was 11:50 a.m., and a telegram from Lestrade arrived. Shooting near Whitechapel. Suspect fled. Ledger matches. Holmes wired back, confirmed. Meet at Drayton's estate, 6 p.m. Back inside, Holmes pored over the ledger, his mind a whirlwind of deduction. The entries revealed Ashbourne's data blackmail scheme tied to a failed investment, orchestrated by the Order to fund their chemical experiments. Drayton sought power, Holmes said, using the Reaper's veil to silence dissenters. I noted the names Ashbourne, read Harrow, linked to financial losses Drayton had engineered. The time was 12:15 p.m., and a knock brought a visitor, Edward Ashbourne, his face pale. "Mr. Holmes," he stammered, "Clara told me everything. Father's debt, 'tis my fault. I gambled, lost, and Drayton threatened us." Holmes's eyes narrowed. "Your motive, then, was survival." Next move. At 1 p.m., Holmes dispatched a message to Lestrade, requesting surveillance on Drayton's estate, while we analyzed the watch. "A secondary base," Holmes said, "where the Reaper's devices are made. We found a workshop, vials, sketches, a half-built dispersal device, its timer set for midnight. At 3 p.m., a creak from the rafters sent us alert, and a masked figure dropped, a blade flashing. Holmes parried, disarming them, but they escaped through a window, leaving a trail of iridescent liquid. The Reaper's apprentice," Holmes growled, collecting the device. The time was 3:30 p.m., and we returned to Baker Street, Holmes dissecting the mechanism. "A timer and gas release," he said, "triggered remotely. Drayton controls it." And a second telegram from Lestrade reported a break-in at the estate. "Drayton's guards alerted. Proceed with caution." Lestrade and his men flanked us, but the gates were unlocked, a trap laid bare. Inside, the hall was empty, the air heavy with the sweet scent. At 6:15 p.m., a servant stumbled forward, gasping, "He's in the study, madness." We found Sir Percival Drayton, his face gaunt, a dispersal device in hand. "Holmes," he sneered, "you're too late. The veil falls at midnight, and London will bow." Holmes lunged, but Drayton activated the device, a hiss of gas filling the room. I tackled Holmes aside, the antidote vials shattering as we rolled clear. At 6:30 p.m., Drayton fled, locking the study door behind him. We forced it open, finding a tunnel leading to the cellar, its walls lined with canisters. The time was 6:45 p.m., and a note pinned to a canister read, "Midnight, the final act." Holmes dismantled the canisters, his hands steady while I guarded. The entrance, the suspense, a living pulse. At 7 p.m., Lestrade joined us, reporting Drayton's escape vehicle spotted heading east. "We pursue," Holmes said, "but first, the antidote spread." We wired the formula citywide, the clock ticking toward 8 p.m., back at Baker Street by 9 p.m. Holmes studied the map, pinpointing Drayton's likely hideout, a warehouse by the Thames. "The Reaper's endgame," he said. The time was 10 p.m., and a creak sounded above Holmes's eyes, meeting mine. "He's close," he whispered. We armed ourselves, the midnight deadline a shadow over us, the city's fate-hand hours hanging on the next hours, the gunshot, the betrayal. The Valhall pointed to a climax where justice would be forged or lost. The clock in 221B Baker Street ticked ominously toward 10:15 p.m. on this perilous Tuesday, July 1st, 2025. The fog pressing against the windows like a living entity, when a sudden bone-chilling wail pierced the silence from the Thames docks. A sound so laden with despair, it seemed to carry the weight of the city's doom. I, Dr. John Watson, gripped my revolver, my pulse racing as I turned to Sherlock Holmes, who stood by the map, his face etched with a rare flicker of uncertainty. "Watson," he said, his voice a low growl that cry heralds the Reapers. "Final gambit. Drayton's warehouse is the stage, and midnight the curtain." The suspense wrapped around us like a noose as we prepared to face the alchemist's shadow. The midnight deadline, a mere hour and 45 minutes away. promising a confrontation that could end in triumph or tragedy. We donned our coats, Holmes, securing the dismantled canister and the map, while I packed the remaining antidote vials, the air thick with the scent of impending danger. The time was 10:30 p.m., and a hansom cab sped us toward the Thames, the fog a relentless veil obscuring our path. Lestrade joined us, en route, his men trailing in a second carriage, his face grim. "Holmes," he said, "the docks are a maze. Drayton's got guards armed, ruthless. We've lost 2 officers already." Holmes's eyes gleamed. "Then we strike with precision. The warehouse is our target. Neutralize the device before midnight." The cab jolted to a stop at 10:45 p.m., the docks a shadowy expanse, the whale's echo lingering like a ghost. We approached the warehouse, its silhouette looming against the fog, its windows dark but for a faint, eerie glow. At 11 p.m., a guard patrol passed, and Holmes signaled us to wait, his plan unfolding with military precision. As they moved on, we breached a side door, the air inside reeking of chemicals, the hum of machinery vibrating through the floor. The interior was a labyrinth of crates and vats, a laboratory at its heart, where Sir Percival Drayton stood, his masked face turned toward us, a dispersal device in hand. "Holmes," he sneered, "you've walked into my crucible. The veil will rise, and London will kneel or die." The suspense peaked as he activated the device, a hiss of gas filling the room. Holmes lunged, tackling Drayton, while I shielded Lestrade, the gas cloud swirling. I administered the antidote to us, the vials dwindling as Holmes wrestled the device away, smashing it against a vat. The time was 11:15 p.m., and Drayton laughed, a mad cackle. "You've destroyed one, but the network triggers at midnight citywide." He broke free, fleeing into the maze, leaving us to face the aftermath. We searched the lab, finding a control panel, its wires pulsing, a timer counting down from 45 minutes. "A failsafe," Holmes said, his fingers flying over the controls. "We disarm it tore millions perish." At 11:30 p.m., Lestrade's men secured the perimeter, reporting more guards approaching. Holmes deciphered the panel, identifying a master switch, but a trap gas vents opened, forcing us to retreat. I dragged an unconscious officer clear, the antidote saving him, while Holmes sealed the vents with a crate, buying time. The clock struck 11:45 p.m., and a hidden door revealed a second chamber, its walls lined with canisters, a ledger detailing the network's locations. "Drayton's legacy," Holmes muttered, pocketing it. The suspense was a living pulse, the timer at 30 minutes. The city's fate in our hands. We split tasks. Lestrade wired the locations to Scotland Yard for evacuation, while Holmes and I tackled the panel. At midnight, minus 20 minutes, a guard burst in, firing wildly. Holmes disarmed him, but the shot grazed my arm, the pain a sharp reminder of our peril. I bandaged it, the antidote steadying me, as Holmes rewired the panel, his hands trembling with focus. The time was 11:50 p.m., and a second device activated, its gas weaker but persistent. We used the last vial, the suspense mounting as the timer hit 15 minutes. At 11:55 p.m., the panel beeped, the master switch disengaged, the hum ceasing. Holmes exhaled, but a shadow moved Drayton, a blade in hand, lunging. I blocked him. The struggle fierce, until Lestrade subdued him. the clock striking midnight. The warehouse fell silent, the threat neutralized, but Drayton's smirk lingered. "You've won a battle," he whispered, "but the order endures." We secured him, the ledger in hand. The docks quiet at 12:05 a.m. Back at Baker Street by 1 a.m., Holmes analyzed the ledger, finding new names, the order's reach vast. The suspense lingered, the alchemist's shadow cast long, promising more to come. The first light of dawn crept through the fog-laden windows of 2-1B Baker Street at 2:15 a.m. on this tense Tuesday, July 1st, 2025, the silence shattered by the sharp crack of a distant explosion. The glass and jolting me, Dr. John Watson, from a fitful rest. My bandaged arm throbbed as I reached for my revolver. The room bathed in the flickering gaslight, while Sherlock Holmes, still hunched over the order's ledger, sprang to his feet, his eyes blazing with a mix of fury and resolve. "Watson," he barked, slamming the ledger shut. "That was no random blast, it's the order's retaliation. Drayton's desperate gambit to erase his trail." The suspense surged like a tidal wave as we rushed to the window, the fog parting to reveal a plume of smoke rising from Soho. The safe house ablaze, its flames a grim testament to the society's unyielding grip. We donned our coats with haste. The clock striking 2:20 a.m., and a hansom cab hurtled us toward the inferno. The streets eerily silent, save for the distant wail of sirens and the occasional shout of a night watchman. The air grew thick with ash as we approached. The safe house, a smoldering ruin by 2:35 a.m., when Inspector Lestrade met us, his face grim beneath the flickering light. "The safe house, Holmes," he said, his voice hoarse from smoke. "Drayton's men torched it, evidence gone, but we dragged out a survivor. Claims Drayton's plotting a final strike at dawn. Says the order's true leaders pulling the strings." Holmes's jaw tightened, his mind already racing as we navigated the debris. The survivor, a guard with a bandaged arm and a face etched with fear, gasped through labored breaths. "He betrayed," U.S. said. "The real boss waits at St. Paul's. Dawn's the hour, or we're all done." The suspense coiled tighter. The time now 2:50 a.m., with dawn at 5:46 a.m. PK tie, barely 3 hours to unravel the plot. Back at Baker Street by 3:15 a.m. The room still carried the faint scent of smoke as Holmes pored over the ledger and Evelyn Hart's journal, his fingers tracing the ink with a surgeon's precision. "The true leader," he muttered, his voice a low growl, "someone above Drayton, orchestrating this chaos." The dawn strike suggests a public spectacle, a demonstration of power. I tended to my arm, the graze a dull ache, while he wired Lestrade, ordering a discreet stakeout at St. Paul's. His instructions, meticulous: position men at all entrances, but hold until my signal. No overt moves. The time was 3:30 a.m., and a telegram crackled back. "Drayton spotted near the cathedral, heavily guarded. Proceed with caution, risk of ambush." Holmes's eyes gleamed with a dangerous light. "A trap, Watson, but we'll turn it to our advantage. The order's arrogance will be their undoing." We set out at 4 a.m., the hansom cab cutting through the thinning fog. The city a maze of shadows and whispered fears. The journey was tense, the clatter of hooves a stark contrast to the silence within, broken only by Holmes's murmured deductions. "The veil's evolution suggests a chemist's hand, perhaps Hart's, under duress," he said, "but the scale points to a financier or noble with resources. I nodded, recalling the ledger's cryptic entries, the names a web of intrigue. At 4:30 a.m., St. Paul's loomed ahead, its dome a silhouette against the paling sky. Guards patrolling its perimeter with a precision that bespoke military training. Holmes devised a diversion, instructing Lestrade's men to create a commotion. At the west entrance feigned arrests of petty thieves to draw attention. The plan worked at 4:45 a.m., the guards rushing to investigate, allowing us to scale the north side, our movements silent as shadows. Inside, the cathedral's vast silence enveloped us, the air cool and heavy with the weight of history. We descended to the crypt at 4:50 a.m., the key from the black box fitting a hidden panel, unlocking a chamber bathed in the flicker of oil lamps. A circle of masked figures awaited, their robes bearing the order's symbol, Lord Cedric Harrow. Bound and gagged at their center, his eyes wide with a mix of defiance and fear. A tall figure stepped forward, voice distorted by a mask. "Holmes, you've disrupted our grand design. The veil was to purify London, to elevate the worthy. Join us or die with the rabble." Holmes's response was a calculated challenge, his voice steady. "Reveal yourselves, or I'll expose your names to every corner of the empire." The suspense peaked as the leader unmasked Sir Alfred Grayson, a high court judge, his eyes cold and unyielding. "The elite must rule," he intoned, "and you, Holmes, are an obstacle." At 5 a.m., Grayson activated a device, a hiss of gas filling the crypt, its iridescent shimmer a deadly promise. Holmes had anticipated, using the antidote from the box, a decoy vial he'd prepared, smashing it to release a neutralizing mist. He lunged, disarming Grayson with a swift move. The struggle fierce as masks fell one by one, bankers, nobles, a parliamentarian, all revealed in the lamplight. At 5:10 a.m., I, unable to bear the weight, arrived with Lestrade, our entry breaking the fray. The guards, caught off guard, surrendered, their weapons clattering to the stone floor. The device was dismantled, its timer frozen at 5 minutes, the threat neutralized. Harrow, freed, confessed through gritted teeth. Grayson orchestrated the veil, using Eleanor and Drayton as shields. The order's vision was his control through fear. The time was 5:30 a.m., and we secured the leaders, the crypt echoing with their defeat, the air still tinged with the gas's fading scent. Eleanor's role as a pawn deepened the mystery, her greed a tool for Grayson's ambition. We questioned him, his arrogance unshaken. "The society will rise again," he sneered. "We've won a battle, but the blade cuts eternal." The clock struck 5:45 a.m., and Lestrade's men arrived to take the prisoners, their chains rattling as they were led away. We searched the chamber, finding a second ledger listing safe houses and assets, a fortune in blackmail funds. Holmes pocketed it, his expression grim. "This is but a fracture in their network," he said. At 6 a.m., we returned to Baker Street, the dawn breaking over a city unaware of its near doom. The suspense, a faint echo as we planned the next move. The morning stretched into 7 a.m., and Holmes analyzed the new ledger, cross-referencing it with Hart's journal. Grayson's wealth funded the veil, he deduced, but the chemist's heart, Crane, were coerced. The enforcers, like Lang, were mercenaries. I brewed tea, the routine a balm, while he wired Scotland Yard with the names, ordering raids. At 8 a.m., a telegram confirmed arrests, the city's elite shaken, but Holmes remained restless. "The order's roots run deep," he murmured, his gaze fixed on the fog outside. The suspense lingered, a reminder that treachery's shadow might yet return, the society's grip a wound that refused to heal. The faint chime of St. Paul's bells still lingered in the air at 6:05 a.m. on this grim Tuesday, July 1st, 2025, when a sudden, bone-chilling wail pierced the fog from the streets below 221B Baker Street, its raw terror slicing through the dawn. Mist like a scythe, I, Dr. John Watson, sprang from my chair, my bandaged arm protesting as I reached for my revolver. The room bathed in the soft glow of the rising sun, while Sherlock Holmes, his face etched with the night's exhaustion, dashed to the window. "Watson," he snapped, his voice a whip-crack of urgency. "That's no ordinary cryouts. The order's next move. A signal of chaos unleashed from within their own ranks." The suspense gripped us as we raced downstairs, the wail fading into the fog, the city teetering on the brink of a new nightmare with the morning barely begun. We emerged at 6:10 a.m., the fog swirling around a frantic crowd gathered near a fallen figure, a young woman, her face serene, no wounds marring her skin, the sweet scent of the veil clinging to her lips like a shroud. Lestrade arrived at 6:15 a.m., his expression a mask of dread, his coat damp with mist. "Another victim, Holmes," he said, his voice trembling with fatigue. "Found her made hysterical claims," a shadow whispered before she collapsed. "The order's not done, and Grayson's arrest hasn't slowed them." Holmes knelt, examining her with his magnifying glass, detecting a refined residue on her lips. "Eleanor's formula enhanced," he muttered, scraping a sample into a vial. The time was 6:20 a.m., and a note tucked in her hand read, "The countdown begins. Noon, or London burns. The silent blade." The threat was personal. The suspense a noose tightening around our necks as the noon deadline loomed 6 hours away. Back at Baker Street by 6:45 a.m., the room still carried the faint chill of the night as Holmes set up his chemistry set, the gaslight casting long shadows across the walls. He analyzed the sample, his movements precise, his brow furrowed. "A variant," he said, his voice low, faster acting, dispersed via a new device. "The ledger hints at a central hub, likely the order's archives, hidden to protect their secrets." I tended to my arm, the graze a dull ache, while he wired Lestrade, requesting a thorough search of Eleanor's estate. The time was 7 a.m., and a telegram crackled back. "Estate raided. Found a vault, locked tight. Suspect archives inside, traps detected." We set out at 7:30 a.m., the hansom cab cutting through the waking city, the fog lifting to reveal a populous tense with whispered rumors. Eleanor's estate loomed at 8 a.m., its Gothic facade a silent witness to treachery, the vault a steel door guarded by intricate locks and hidden mechanisms. Holmes approached with caution, disarming a gas vent at 8:15 a.m., the hiss a reminder of our peril, the air tinged with the veil's fading scent. We entered, finding shelves lined with documents, a map marking a warehouse in Limehouse, and a journal detailing the order's financial maneuvers. "The hub," Holmes said, pocketing the map, his voice steady. At 8:30 a.m., a creak from the upper floor sent us alert, and a masked figure attacked, a blade flashing in the dim light. Holmes parried with a chair, disarming them, but they escaped through a window, leaving a device its timer set for noon. The suspense surging as the countdown stood at 3 hours and 30 minutes. We reached Limehouse at 9 a.m. The warehouse, a fortress of shadows, its walls reinforced, guards patrolling with a vigilance that bespoke desperation. Holmes signaled Lestrade's men to create a diversion, a staged brawl at the docks, drawing attention at 9:15 a.m. We breached the east wall. The air inside thrummed with the hum of machinery, a control room housing multiple devices, their timers synchronized to noon. At 9:30 a.m., the order's leader emerged, Lord Cedric Harrow, Eleanor's cousin, his face a mask of arrogance, a dispersal device in hand. "Holmes," he sneered, "the veil will cleanse London of weakness. Noon is our triumph, and you're too late." He activated the device, gas erupting in a shimmering cloud, but Holmes smashed it with a crate, the antidote vials saving us at 9:45 a.m. The struggle, a blur of motion, the fight intensified, Harrow's guards joining the fray, their numbers overwhelming. I felled one with a chair, the wood splintering, while Holmes grappled Harrow, his strength waning but his resolve iron. At 10 a.m., Lestrade's men breached the west side, their shouts echoing, neutralizing the guards with precise shots. Devices, timers read 2 hours, and Holmes rewired the panel, his hands trembling with focus, sweat beading on his brow. At 10:30 a.m., a second wave of gas forced us back, the vents opening with a sinister whine. I dragged an unconscious officer clear, the antidote steadying him, while Holmes sealed the vents with debris, buying precious minutes. The suspense peaked as the clock struck 11 a.m., the timer at 1 hour, Harrow laughing through his bonds. "You'll fail, Holmes. The blade cuts deeper than you know." At 11:15 a.m., Holmes dismantled the first device, its hum ceasing, but a hidden trigger released a weaker gas cloud, testing our resolve. We used the last vial, the air clearing at 11:30 a.m., the timer now 30 minutes. Harrow taunted, "Grayson was a figurehead, I'm the true blade. The order's vision lives." Holmes ignored him, focusing on the panel, his fingers dancing over wires. At 11:45 a.m., a guard broke free, firing wildly, the shot grazing my leg. I bandaged it, the pain a sharp spur, as Holmes rewired the final connection. The clock struck noon. At 12 p.m., the devices silent, the threat averted. The warehouse falling quiet, save for Harrow's defeated curses. Back at Baker Street by 12:15 p.m., Harrow confessed in a cell, his voice bitter. The order aimed to control London's elite, using the veil as leverage. Eleanor was a pawn, her greed my tool. I'm the blade. Holmes and others will rise. We secured him, the ledger revealing more names, chemists, enforcers, nobles stretching across the empire. At 1 p.m., Holmes vowed, the society ends here, but its echoes must be hunted. The suspense lingered, the countdowns end a hollow victory. The order's roots still deep, treachery a shadow in the light. The soft chime of the Baker Street clock marked 6 a.m. on this fateful Tuesday, July 1st, 2025, the fog thinning to reveal a city holding its breath, mist like a blade. I, Dr. John Watson, leaped from my chair, my bandaged arm and leg protesting as I reached for my revolver. The room bathed in the pale light of morning, while Sherlock Holmes, his face etched with the night's toll, dashed To the window. That's no ordinary cry. The suspense gripped us as we raced downstairs, the scream fading into the fog swirling around a frantic crowd gathered near a fallen figure, a young woman, her face serene, no wounds marring her skin. The sweet scent of the veil clinging to her lips like a deathly perfume. Another victim, Holmes, he said, his voice trembling with exhaustion. Found her, made hysterical claims, a shadow whispered before she collapsed. Holmes knelt, examining her with his magnifying glass, detecting a refined residue on her lips. Eleanor's formula, enhanced beyond Hart's notes, he muttered, scraping a sample into a vial. The time was 6:15 a.m., and a note tucked in. Her hand read, "The countdown begins. Noon, or London burns." The silent blade. The threat was a personal gauntlet, the suspense, a noose, tightening around our necks as the noon deadline. A.m. The room still carried the faint chill of the night as Holmes set up his chemistry set, the gaslight casting long shadows across the walls. "A variant," he said, his voice low and measured, faster acting, dispersed via a new device, likely a handheld aerosol, refined for stealth. From our grasp, I tended to my wounds, the graze, and cut a dull ache, while he wired Lestrade, requesting a thorough search of Eleanor's estate for any concealed vaults. The time was 7 a.m., and a telegram crackled back. "Estate raided. Found a vault, locked tight with traps. Suspect archives inside. Proceed with care." We set out at 7:30 a.m., the hansom cab cutting through the waking city, the fog lifting to reveal a populous tense with whispered rumors of the Vale's return. Eleanor's estate. The vault, a steel door, guarded by intricate locks and hidden gas vents. Holmes approached with the caution of a bomb diffuser, disarming a vent at 8:15 a.m. The hiss, a stark reminder of our peril, the air tinged with the Vale's fading scent. We entered, finding shelves lined with documents, a map marking a warehouse, chemical purchases, and coded messages. "The hub," Holmes said, pocketing the map, his voice steady with purpose. At 8:30 a.m., a creak from the upper floor sent us alert, and a masked figure attacked, a blade flashing in the dim light. Holmes parried with a chair, the wood splintering, disarming them, but they escaped through a window, leaving a device. Timer set for noon. The suspense surging as the countdown stood at 3 hours and 30 minutes. We reached Limehouse at 9 a.m. The warehouse, a fortress of shadows, its walls reinforced with steel, guards patrolling with a vigilance that bespoke desperation. Staged brawl at the docks drawing attention at 9:15 a.m. We breached the east wall. The air inside thrummed with the hum of machinery, a control room housing multiple devices, their timers synchronized to noon. At 9:30 a.m., the order's leader emerged, Lord Cedric Harrow, Eleanor's cousin, his face a mask of arrogance, a dispersal device in hand. "Holmes," he sneered, "the veil will cleanse London of weakness. Noon is our triumph, and you're too late to stop the blade's rise." He activated the device, gas erupting in a shimmering cloud. But Holmes smashed it with a crate, the antidote vials saving us at 9:45 a.m. The struggle a blur of motion and desperation, the fight intensified. Harrow's guards joining the fray, their numbers a tide against us. I felled one with a chair, the impact jarring my arm, while Holmes grappled Harrow, his strength waning. But his resolve, ironclad, neutralizing the guards with precise shots and batons. The device's timers read 2 hours, and Holmes rewired the panel, his hands trembling with focus, sweat beading on his brow as he muttered calculations. The vents opening with a sinister whine, the air thickening. I dragged an unconscious officer clear, the antidote steadying him, while Holmes sealed the vents with debris, buying precious minutes as the suspense peaked. The clock struck 11 a.m., the timer at 1 hour, Harrow laughing through his bonds. "You'll fail, Holmes. The blade cuts deeper than you know, and the countdown is inevitable." At 11:15 a.m., Holmes dismantled the first device, its hum ceasing, but a hidden trigger released a weaker gas cloud, a test of our endurance. The Order's vision lives beyond these walls, in the hearts of the elite. Holmes ignored him, focusing on the panel, his fingers dancing over wires with a pianist's grace. At 11:45 a.m., a guard broke free, firing wildly, the shot grazing my leg a second time. I bandaged it with a strip of cloth, the pain a sharp spur. As Holmes rewired the final connection, his breath ragged, the clock struck noon at 12 p.m., the devices falling silent, the threat averted. The warehouse quiet, save for Harrow's defeated curses and the distant toll of church bells. Back at Baker Street by 12:15 p.m., Harrow confessed in a cell, his voice bitter with defeat. The Order aimed to control London's elite, using the veil as leverage to bend wills and wallets. "I'm the blade, Holmes, the architect of this silence, but others will rise from the ashes." We secured him, the ledger revealing a network of names chemists like Hart, enforcers like Lang, nobles stretching across the empirage, a thread in a vast tapestry of treachery. At 1 p.m., Holmes vowed, "The society ends here, but its echoes must be hunted with relentless precision." The suspense lingered. The countdown's end a hollow victory. The Order's roots still deep, treachery a shadow cast long in the noon sun. The clock in 221B Baker Street ticked toward 6 a.m. on this fateful Tuesday, July 1st, 2025. The fog thinning to reveal a city holding its breath in the wake of the noon crisis. When a soft, rhythmic tapping sounded at the door, a sound so deliberate, it sent a shiver down my spine, a harbinger of unresolved danger. I, Dr. John Watson, rose from my chair, my bandaged arm and leg stiff with fatigue, my revolver at the ready, as Sherlock Holmes, his eyes sharp despite the night's toll, motioned for silence with a raised hand. "Watson," he whispered, his voice a thread of steel beneath the tension. "That tap is no friend, it's the Order's final gambit, a summons to judgment in the shadows of their defeat." The suspense coiled tight as we approached the door, the tapping persisting like a heartbeat, the morning light casting long shadows, promising a verdict that would seal the fate of London and ourselves. We opened the door at 6:05 a.m., finding a small black animal box on the step, its surface cold to the touch, a faint hum emanating from within, a note affixed with trembling fingers. "The silent blade convenes, St. Paul's Crypt, 7 a.m. Come alone, Holmes, or the city pays the ultimate price." The threat was a personal gauntlet, the suspense a living pulse, as Holmes pocketed the box, revealing a key etched with the Order's symbol. "A trap," he said, his voice steady, but also an opportunity. The Order's leaders gather, chance to end this once and for all. I protested, my medical instincts urging caution, but he was resolute. "Stay here, Watson. Wire Lestrade. If I'm not back by 8 a.m., prepare the antidote. We may need it." The time was 6:15 a.m., and he departed, the fog swallowing him, leaving me to pace the room, the tension a knot in my chest. The keys wait a mystery in his pocket. At 6:45 a.m., I monitored the telegraph, the city stirring into a cautious dawn, the streets alive with the murmur of survivors and the clatter of early carts. Holmes reached St. Paul's at 6:55 a.m., slipping into the crypt alone, the key unlocking a hidden chamber sealed with ancient stone. Inside, a circle of masked figures awaited, their robes bearing the order's symbol, Lord Cedric Harrow bound and gagged at their center, his eyes wide with a mix of defiance and fear. A tall figure stepped forward, voice distorted by a mask, the air thick with the scent of wax and power. "Holmes, you've disrupted our grand design." The veil was to purify London, to elevate the worthy above the masses. "Join us or die with the rabble you defend." Holmes's response was a calculated challenge, his voice cutting through the gloom. "Reveal yourselves, or I'll expose your names to every corner of the empire, stripping away your shadows." The suspense peaked as the leader unmasked Sir Alfred Grayson, a high court judge, his eyes cold and unyielding, flanked by lesser nobles and a disgraced MP. "The elite must rule," he intoned, "and you, Holmes, are an obstacle to be erased." At 7 a.m., Grayson activated a device, a hiss of gas filling the crypt, its iridescent shimmer a deadly promise in the lamplight. Holmes had anticipated, using the antidote from the box, a decoy vial he'd prepared with Hart's formula, smashing it to release a neutralizing mist that clashed with the veil. He lunged, disarming Grayson with a swift judo move. The struggle, fierce as masks fell one by one, bankers like Harold Grayson, nobles like Lady Margaret Wells, a parliamentarian, with blood on his hands, all revealed in the flickering light. At 7:10 a.m., I, unable to bear the weight, arrived with Lestrade, our entry breaking the fray, the crypt echoing with shouts and the clatter of steel. The guards, caught off guard, surrendered, their weapons clattering to the stone floor, the device dismantled with a final twist of wire, its timer frozen at 5 minutes. The threat was neutralized, but the air remained thick with tension. Harrow, freed at 7:15 a.m., confessed through gritted teeth, his voice raw. Grayson orchestrated the veil, using Eleanor and Drayton as shields, their greed my tools, the orders. Vision was his to control London's elite through fear and silence. I was the blade, but he was the mind. The revelation deepened the mystery, Grayson's arrogance unshaken as we bound him. "The society will rise again," he sneered, his voice a venomous whisper. "You've won a battle, but the blade cuts eternal, its roots buried in the heart of power." The time was 7:30 a.m., and Lestrade's men arrived to take the prisoners, their chains rattling as they were led into the dawn light, the crypt falling silent, save for the drip of water from the ancient walls. We searched the chamber at 7:45 a.m., finding a second ledger listing safe houses across the city, warehouses in Whitechapel, estates in Kensington, and assets worth millions. In blackmail funds, a fortune built on the veil's terror. Holmes pocketed it, his expression grim, his mind already turning to the next step. "This is but a fracture in their network," he said, his voice low. "The order's tendrils reach beyond these walls." At 8 a.m., back at Baker Street, I wired Lestrade with the ledger's details, ordering raids on the listed locations, the telegraph clicking with urgency. The arrests began at 9 a.m., the city's elite shaken, their mansions raided, their secrets laid bare. But Holmes remained restless, his gaze fixed on the fog outside. "The order's roots run deep," he murmured, "and vigilance is our only shield." The morning stretched into 10 a.m., and we sat by the fire. The silence a hard-won peace as I wrote my notes, the case unfolding on paper. Holmes analyzed the box further, finding a hidden compartment with a list of coded messages. Hints of international ties. The order's ambition stretched to Paris, Vienna, New York. "A global conspiracy," he said, his voice tinged with awe and dread. At 11 a.m., a telegram confirmed the raid's success. The Vale's reign ended, but Holmes's mind was already on the horizon. "The silent verdict is justice," he declared, "but the shadow of treachery lingers. We must hunt the echoes." The suspense faded, replaced by a quiet resolve. The murder that left no wound resolved, but the fight for London's soul far from over.